The billionaire screamed at the poor little black girl in Arabic, thinking she wouldn't understand. But when she responded fluently, his jaw dropped and he discovered something incredible about her past. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. Picture this: Fifth Avenue, Manhattan, the most expensive real estate in America. And there, sitting on the marble steps of the Sterling Grand Hotel, the crown jewel of luxury hospitality, was something that simply didn't belong. Alexander Sterling slammed the door of his $250,000 Bentley, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the sidewalk with the rhythm of a man who owned the world. At 32, this billionaire had crushed competitors, destroyed business partnerships, and built an empire on the backs of others. His cold grey eyes had never shown mercy. His heart, well, most people wondered if he even had one. "Move that thing away from my property," he barked at his doorman, pointing at the small figure huddled on his pristine steps. The thing was a little black girl, no more than 8 years old. Her clothes were worn but clean, her hair neatly braided despite her circumstances. In her tiny hands, she held a piece of cardboard with words that made Alex's blood boil. "Please help, I'm hungry." This was his hotel, his reputation, his carefully crafted image of perfection, and this child was destroying it with her very existence. The rage that had built Alex's fortune exploded from his chest, but here's what nobody expected. Alex Sterling spoke 7 languages, including Arabic, learned during his ruthless business dealings in Dubai. So when his fury erupted, it came out in words he was certain she'd never understand. "Imshi min huna hal tifla al-kathira," he screamed, his voice echoing off the building's golden facade. "Get lost, you filthy child! Anti-tujar surat al-funduk al-fahakir. You're destroying my luxury hotel's image." The Arabic poured out of him like venom, every cruel word designed to humiliate, to make her feel smaller than she already was. Hotel guests stopped and stared. His staff froze in horror, but Alex didn't care. This girl needed to disappear, and if terror was what it took, so be it. But then something happened that would shatter everything Alexander Sterling thought he knew about the world. The little girl stood up slowly, brushing dust from her faded dress. She looked directly into his eyes, those piercing brown eyes holding a wisdom that didn't belong in someone so young, and spoke in flawless, aristocratic Arabic that could have come from a palace. "Sir, ana la ujar Aishay. أنا سوفي ويليامز ووالدي كان يسمالون في السفر الأمريكي في الكويت قبل أن يتوفيا في حادث سيارة. إني أفهم كل ما قلته وأنا مؤدبة أكثر مما تظن." The words hit like lightning. "Sir, I'm not destroying anything. I'm Sophie Williams, and my parents worked at the American Embassy in Kuwait before they died in a car accident. I understand everything you said, and I'm more educated than you think." Alex's world stopped spinning. This wasn't just any homeless child begging for coins. This little girl had just responded to his Arabic assault with the refined vocabulary of diplomatic circles, the educated accent of someone who had lived among ambassadors and cultural attachés. As the horrifying reality crashed over him, one thought pierced through his shock. Dear God, what have I just done? The silence that followed Sophie's words stretched like a chasm between two worlds. Alex Sterling, the man who had negotiated billion-dollar deals without blinking, who had crushed competitors with a single phone call, stood frozen on his own doorstep, staring at a child who had just dismantled his entire worldview in perfect Arabic. His hands trembled, actually trembled, something that hadn't happened since his father's funeral 15 years ago. The Arabic words Sophie had spoken echoed in his mind, each syllable a precision strike against everything he thought he knew about the world. "Marcus," Alex whispered to his assistant, never taking his eyes off Sophie. His voice sounded foreign to his own ears. "Clear my schedule. Sir, you have the Shanghai investors at 3, the board meeting at 4:30, and dinner with the—" I said clear it. The tremor in his voice made Marcus step back. In 12 years of working for Alexander Sterling, Marcus had never heard his boss sound vulnerable. Sophie remained standing, her small frame somehow commanding the entire scene, despite her worn purple dress and scuffed sneakers. Hotel guests had stopped to stare, their whispered conversations creating a buzz that usually would have sent Alex into a fury about maintaining his hotel's prestigious atmosphere. But now he was oblivious to everything except those unnervingly intelligent brown eyes, studying him with the intensity of someone far older than 8 years. "You worked in Kuwait," Alex said slowly, switching to English, his mind racing to process what he'd just witnessed. The sophisticated vocabulary, the perfect pronunciation, the cultural nuances embedded in her response. This wasn't something a child picked up from textbooks. "Your parents, they were American diplomats?" "My father was cultural attaché James Williams. My mother, Dr. Sarah Williams, was a linguistic consultant for the State Department." Sophie's voice carried the measured cadence of someone who had spent years in diplomatic circles, someone trained in the art of precise communication. "We lived in the diplomatic quarter in Kuwait City for 4 years. I spoke Arabic daily with our housekeeper's children, attended international school with diplomats' kids from 12 countries, and sat through more cultural briefings than most adults experience in a lifetime." Each word hit Alex like a physical blow. James Williams, Sarah Williams. The names triggered a memory, something he'd read in the International Herald Tribune 18 months ago while flying back from a business trip to London. A tragic story buried in the international news section, the car accident that had claimed 2 American diplomats during a sandstorm on the highway between Kuwait City and the airport. "Dear God," he whispered, the color draining from his face. "You're their daughter. The article said they had a daughter." "Had," Sophie corrected with devastating quiet precision. "The system couldn't locate any relatives in America when they searched. I was classified as an unaccompanied minor and placed in emergency foster care." She looked down at her worn shoes, her dignified posture wavering for just a moment. "Some homes aren't safe for children who look like me, Mr. Sterling. Some people see a black child from a complicated background and make assumptions about what I must be like." The casual way she delivered this crushing truth, the matter-of-fact acceptance of systemic failure and prejudice, made something crack inside Alex's chest, a sensation so foreign, so overwhelming, that he couldn't identify it. This child, this brilliant, educated, dignified little girl who spoke multiple languages and carried herself with the poise of royalty, had been failed by every adult system designed to protect her. "How long have you been on the streets?" The question escaped his lips before he could stop it, his voice barely audible above the Manhattan traffic. 3 months and 4 days. Sophie lifted her chin with a pride that broke his heart into pieces he didn't know existed. "But I want you to understand something, Mr. Sterling. I'm not a beggar. I don't take charity I haven't earned. I ask for help because I need food to survive, but I'm not anyone's victim. I'm a survivor." As Alex stared into those wise, wounded, defiant eyes, one thought consumed him with the force of a revelation. How many other remarkable souls had he walked past in his life, seeing only what his prejudices told him to see? "You're coming with me," Alex said suddenly, the words escaping from some deeper part of himself before his rational mind could engage its usual filters and calculations. Sophie stepped back immediately, her survival instincts flaring like a match struck in darkness, every muscle in her small body tensed for flight. "I don't go anywhere with strangers, no matter what they offer me. That's how children disappear." The wisdom in her caution, the street-smart awareness that shouldn't belong to someone her age, hit Alex with another wave of shame. You're absolutely right. Smart girl. He ran his hands through his perfectly styled hair, a gesture that would have shocked his board members who had never seen Alexander Sterling display uncertainty or reveal any crack in his armor of absolute control. Look, he continued, crouching down to her eye level in a movement that felt both foreign and strangely natural. I own the penthouse restaurant upstairs, 24 floors up, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. You're hungry. I can see it in how carefully you ate that piece of bread earlier. I'm buying you lunch, a proper meal, that's all. He paused, and then added something that surprised even him, words that seemed to come from a part of his soul he'd thought had died years ago. And I owe you an apology, a real one. What I said to you in Arabic, those words, that anger, that cruelty, you didn't deserve any of it. No child deserves to be spoken to that way, and I'm ashamed of myself. Sophie studied his face with the intensity of someone who had learned to read micro-expressions for survival, who had developed the ability to detect danger or sincerity in the space between heartbeats. Her eyes searched his features for any sign of deception, manipulation, or the kind of false kindness that often preceded something terrible. Whatever she saw there, perhaps genuine remorse, perhaps the shock that was still reverberating through his entire being, must have convinced her because she nodded slowly. One meal, she said firmly. In a public restaurant, and I choose where I sit. The ride up the elevator was the longest 60 seconds of Alex's life. He was acutely aware of how Sophie must appear to his staff, a homeless child, in his private gold-plated elevator, heading to the exclusive restaurant that catered only to Manhattan's elite, where dinner for two could cost more than many families spent on groceries in a month. Mr. Sterling! Chef Rodriguez nearly dropped his knife when they entered the pristine kitchen, his eyes widening as he took in the unlikely pair. We weren't expecting you until dinner service. And you have a guest? Change of plans, Rodriguez. We need your best table. And more importantly, Alex's voice carried its old authority, but underneath there was something new, something that sounded almost like humility. Your very best effort for both of us. As they settled at a corner table overlooking Central Park, Sophie attacked her grilled salmon with the controlled desperation of someone who hadn't eaten a proper meal in days. But even in her hunger, she maintained perfect table manners, the knife held correctly, napkin properly placed, posture straight, another painful reminder of the sophisticated life she'd lost. Tell me about Kuwait, Alex said gently, nursing his untouched coffee while watching this remarkable child navigate her meal with grace that shamed half his usual dinner companions. Sophie's entire face transformed. Her eyes lit up with a radiance that made her look for the first time since he'd met her like the child she should still be allowed to be. It was the most beautiful place in the world, she said, her voice growing animated. The sunset over the Arabian Gulf looked like someone had melted gold and poured it across the water. My parents would take me to the fish market in Salmiya on Friday mornings, and the vendors would compete to teach me new Arabic words. They called me Bint Jamila, beautiful daughter. They would give me dates and figs and tell my parents that I brought good luck to their stalls. Alex watched this transformation with growing amazement. When Sophie spoke about her past, she became luminous, a glimpse of the carefree, loved, secure child she had been before the world collapsed around her. What happened after? He started gently. After they died. Sophie's light dimmed like a candle in wind. Everything changed in one phone call, unphone. The State Department arranged the funeral, settled their affairs, packed up our entire life into boxes that I never saw again. I was put on a plane to New York with a social worker who kept calling me difficult to place and a special situation. She meant well, but she looked at me like I was a problem to be solved rather than a person to be helped. The casual cruelty embedded in that phrase, difficult to place, made Alex's jaw clench with an anger that surprised him with its intensity. But as he watched Sophie methodically finish every bite on her plate, treating each morsel like the precious gift it was, a dangerous thought began forming in his mind. What if she didn't have to be placed anywhere at all? I can't just take in a child, Alexander. Have you completely lost your mind? Michael Harrison's voice crackled through the phone that evening as Alex paced his penthouse office, still wearing the same suit from his encounter with Sophie 8 hours earlier. The fabric felt different now somehow, as if the conversation with her had changed the molecular structure of everything around him. The liability alone would destroy everything you've built, Michael continued, his lawyer's instincts in full alarm mode. What if she's lying about her background? What if this whole diplomat story is an elaborate con? Children are capable of sophisticated deception, especially those who've been living on the streets. What if she's working with someone? What if... Michael, Alex interrupted, his voice carrying a quiet intensity that made his lawyer pause mid-sentence. I watched her speak Arabic like someone who grew up in diplomatic circles. I saw her table manners, her posture, the way she carries herself. This isn't a con. This is a child who's been abandoned by every system that was supposed to protect her. Even if that's true, and I'm not saying it is, you don't know anything about children, Alex. You've never shown interest in having kids. You've never even dated anyone seriously for more than 6 months. You're not father material. You're barely human material on your best days. The words stung, because they contained truth Alex had never bothered to examine. He was 32 years old, worth more than most small countries' GDP, and the closest he'd ever come to caring about another human being was ensuring his employees feared him enough to do their jobs perfectly. Run a background check, Alex said quietly, ignoring the character assassination. Deep dive. James and Sarah Williams, State Department, died in Kuwait 18 months ago in a car accident. Find out everything. Their service record, their daughter, what happened to her after they died. Alex, listen to me. Don't do this. Don't get emotionally involved with some kid you found on the street. You're not the kind of man who takes in strays and plays house. You're a shark, remember? Sharks don't adopt minnows. The word strays hit Alex like a physical slap. She's not a stray, Michael. She's a brilliant child who's been failed by every adult who was supposed to care about her welfare. And maybe, his voice dropped to something barely above a whisper, maybe I'm tired of being the kind of person who would walk past someone like her without a second thought. After hanging up, Alex stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, looking down at the city where Sophie was spending another night exposed to dangers that made his stomach churn. The Manhattan skyline that usually filled him with pride now seemed cold and unforgiving. For the first time in his adult life, Alexander Sterling couldn't sleep, couldn't work, couldn't focus on anything except the image of those dignified brown eyes and the way Sophie had said, "I'm a survivor," with such quiet strength. The next morning, he found her in exactly the same spot, sitting on his hotel steps with that remarkable posture that spoke of diplomatic training and aristocratic upbringing. Her cardboard sign held with the same dignity other children might hold a diploma. "Good morning, Sophie," he said, approaching carefully with the awareness that trust once damaged becomes precious and fragile. She looked up, genuine surprise flickering across her features. "You came back?" "I brought breakfast." He held up a bag from the hotel's restaurant containing fresh croissants, fruit, and orange juice. "And a proposition that I hope you'll consider." Sophie's eyes narrowed, with the wariness of someone who had learned that adult propositions were rarely designed with children's best interests at heart. "What kind of proposition?" "I need someone who speaks Arabic fluently. My hotel empire is expanding into the Middle East, Dubai, Kuwait, Qatar. I need a cultural consultant who understands diplomatic protocols, someone who can help me navigate international business relationships without embarrassing myself or offending potential partners. You're offering me a job? Sophie asked. Skepticism clear in her voice, but underneath it, Alex detected something that might have been hope. I'm offering you a partnership, room and board at the hotel in exchange for your expertise. Your own suite, your own space, your own rules, your own life. No strings attached, no obligations beyond helping me not make a fool of myself with Arabic-speaking clients. Sophie was quiet for a long moment, studying his face with those penetrating eyes that seemed to see straight through to his soul. Why? She finally asked. Why would you do this for someone like me? Alex crouched down to her eye level again, a gesture that was becoming natural in a way that would have terrified his former self. Because yesterday you taught me that I don't know as much about the world as I thought I did. You showed me that my assumptions about people, about worth, about who deserves respect, they were all wrong. And maybe, his voice caught slightly, maybe I'm tired of being wrong about everything that actually matters. As Sophie considered his offer, Alex realized his hands were shaking again. When had the opinion of an 8-year-old become the most important thing in his world? Moving Sophie into the Sterling Grand Hotel felt like smuggling a live grenade into a jewelry store. Every staff member stopped their work to stare. Every guest whispered behind perfectly manicured hands. Alex's carefully cultivated reputation for ruthless perfection was being challenged by an 8-year-old girl with a backpack containing everything she owned and a cardboard sign she refused to throw away. "This is your suite," Alex said, opening the door to what had been his executive guest quarters, a space that typically hosted foreign ministers, movie stars, and oil executives. Sophie stepped inside, her eyes widening as she took in the marble bathroom bigger than most people's bedrooms, the king-size bed with Egyptian cotton sheets, the floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of Central Park that cost more per night than most families spent on housing in a month. "It's bigger than our entire house in Kuwait," she whispered, running her small hand along the mahogany dresser with the reverence of someone who had forgotten what luxury felt like. "It's yours now," Alex replied, then immediately wondered if he was making the biggest mistake of his life or the first truly meaningful decision he'd ever made. "All of it?" Sophie asked, opening the walk-in closet that could have housed a family of 4. "All of it. The room, the bathroom, the view, the privacy. The only rule is that housekeeping comes by once a day, but you can tell them no if you want privacy. This is your home now, Sophie." The word home seemed to hit her like a physical force. She sank down onto the edge of the massive bed, her small frame dwarfed by the expensive furnishings, and for a moment Alex thought she might cry. But instead, she straightened her shoulders and nodded with that dignified composure that continually amazed him. That afternoon brought Sophie's first real test. Alex's video conference with potential investors in Dubai, who were considering a $50 million partnership for a new sterling resort on the Arabian Gulf. The meeting had been scheduled for weeks, and these particular investors were notoriously difficult, having rejected 3 other American hotel chains for what they perceived as cultural insensitivity. "You can sit in the corner and observe if you'd like," Alex told Sophie as he prepared for the call. "Consider it part of your cultural education about international business." Sophie nodded and settled into a chair with a book, seemingly content to read, while Alex handled what he knew would be a challenging negotiation. The Dubai executives appeared on screen exactly on time. 3 serious men in perfectly pressed suits, their expressions politely skeptical. "Mr. Sterling," the lead investor, Khalid al-Rashid, said in English, "we appreciate your interest in partnering with us, but we must be frank. We have concerns about American companies' understanding of our cultural values and business practices." Alex felt the familiar tension of a deal starting to slip away. I assure you, Mr. Al-Rashid, that Sterling Hotels has the utmost respect for Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Sophie's clear voice suddenly interrupted, appearing in the video frame beside Alex. Anna Sophie Williams. والداي كانوا يعملون في السفارة الأمريكية في الكويت وأنا فهم الثقافة العربية من الخلل العيش معكم ل4 سنوات. أريد أن أقول لكم أن السيد ستيرلينغ جاءني إلى هنا لأن يؤمن في أهمية الاحترام الثقافي وليس فقط الأرباح. Alex watched in stunned amazement as the Dubai executives' faces completely transformed. Sophie had just delivered a perfect introduction in formal Arabic, explaining her diplomatic background, and most importantly, telling them that Alex had brought her specifically because he understood the importance of cultural respect, not just profit. The shift in the room was palpable. Khalid al-Rashid smiled for the first time in the call. "Young lady, your Arabic is extraordinary, and your parents, the Williamses, we knew of their excellent work in Kuwait. They were much respected in diplomatic circles." The meeting that had been heading toward polite rejection suddenly became an animated discussion about cultural exchange, mutual respect, and business partnership. By the end of the hour, Alex had not only secured the $50 million deal, but had been invited to Dubai for a ceremonial signing that would open doors throughout the Middle East. "How did you know to do that?" Alex asked afterward, still processing what had just happened. "You were losing them," Sophie said, with the matter-of-fact wisdom that continually astounded him. "They needed to know you respect their culture as more than just a business opportunity. Having someone who speaks their language and understands their values shows you're serious about the relationship, not just the money." Alex stared at this child who had just salvaged his biggest deal of the year and potentially opened up an entire new market for his company. "Sophie, exactly how much do you understand about international business?" "My parents hosted diplomatic dinners every week in Kuwait. I sat quietly in the corner and listened to conversations about trade relationships, cultural negotiations, economic partnerships, conflict resolution." She shrugged as if this were perfectly normal. "Plus, you're not as complicated as you think you are, Mr. Sterling. You care about success, but you're starting to care about doing things the right way, too." That evening, as Alex watched Sophie doing homework she'd created for herself to stay current with her grade level, advanced mathematics, reading comprehension in 3 languages, and what appeared to be a research project on Middle Eastern economic development, he realized something that both thrilled and terrified him. For the first time in his life, Alexander Sterling was starting to care about someone other than himself. But what scared him even more was the growing certainty that Sophie Williams was still hiding secrets that went far deeper than her diplomatic background. 2 weeks into their arrangement, Alex began to believe that maybe, just maybe, he had stumbled into something that could work. Sophie was not just surviving, but thriving. She had gained weight, her eyes had regained some of their childhood sparkle, and her cultural insights had already improved 3 major business negotiations and opened doors to markets Alex had never imagined accessing. More than that, she was changing him in ways he didn't fully understand but couldn't deny. He found himself asking her opinion on decisions that had nothing to do with business. He discovered he enjoyed their morning conversations over breakfast more than any board meeting. He had even caught himself smiling, actually smiling, while listening to her read Arabic poetry aloud in the evenings. Then his phone rang at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, shattering his newfound peace like glass hitting concrete. "Mr. Sterling, this is Janet Morrison from the New York City Administration for Children's Services. We need to talk." Immediately, Alex's blood turned to ice, the coffee cup in his hand suddenly feeling like it weighed 100 pounds. "About what?" "About the minor child you've been harboring without proper authorization. Sophie Williams is a ward of the state, Mr. Sterling. What you're doing constitutes unlawful harboring of a minor, and depending on your relationship with her, it could be classified as kidnapping. The world tilted on its axis. Alex gripped the marble countertop of his kitchen to steady himself. Kidnapping? She was living on the streets, sleeping in doorways, begging for food. I gave her a home, safety, education. You gave a vulnerable child living arrangements without going through proper channels, without background checks, without supervision, without any of the safeguards we have in place to protect minors from exploitation. Janet Morrison's voice was crisp, professional, and utterly unmoved by his explanation. We have reports that you've been seen with her publicly, that she's been attending business meetings in your hotel, that you've given her access to executive facilities. Mr. Sterling, from our perspective, this looks extremely inappropriate. Reports from who? Alex demanded, his mind racing through every interaction, every public appearance, trying to identify who might have called this in. We're not at liberty to reveal our sources, but I can tell you that multiple people have expressed concern about this situation. A wealthy single man, no family background, no experience with children, suddenly taking in a vulnerable minority child with no legal guardianship arrangements. These are exactly the circumstances that require intervention. Alex closed his eyes, feeling his carefully constructed new reality crumbling around him like a house built on sand. What do you want? We're coming to collect Sophie this afternoon at 2 p.m. She needs to be placed in appropriate foster care while we conduct a full investigation into your relationship with her and your motivations for this arrangement. I strongly advise you to have your attorney present. You can't just take her, Mr. Sterling. We not only can, we must. This child has been missing from our system for 3 months. She's been classified as a runaway, and now we discover she's been living with an unrelated adult male under circumstances that raise serious red flags. Our primary concern is Sophie's safety and well-being. Williams, after hanging up, Alex found Sophie in the penthouse kitchen, eating oatmeal while reading a book in Arabic and working through calculus problems that would challenge most high school students. The morning sun streaming through the windows made her look almost angelic, and the sight of her contentment made his heart break in ways he didn't know were possible. Sophie, he said gently, trying to keep the panic out of his voice. We need to talk. She looked up at his face, that impossibly perceptive 8-year-old face that could read emotions like a diplomat reading international treaties, and immediately set down her spoon. They're coming for me, aren't they? How did you know? Because good things don't last for people like me. Her voice was steady, but Alex could see her emotional walls reconstructing themselves in real time, brick by brick. It's okay, Mr. Sterling. You've been kinder to me than most adults ever have. You gave me 2 weeks of feeling safe and valued and respected. I'll remember that for the rest of my life. The resignation in her voice, the practiced acceptance of abandonment, the way she was already preparing to protect herself from another devastating loss, it destroyed something fundamental inside Alex's chest. Sophie, he said, his voice carrying a conviction that surprised even him. What if I told you that you never have to leave again? What if I found a way to make this permanent? The hope that flickered in her eyes was so fragile, so precious, so heartbreakingly vulnerable that Alex knew in that moment he would fight heaven and earth to protect it. Can you do that? She whispered. I don't know, he admitted, but I'm going to try. I'm going to call lawyers, social workers, politicians, anyone who will listen. I'm going to fight for you, Sophie Williams, because you're not just some child who wandered into my life. You're the person who showed me what I could become if I stopped being afraid of caring about something more important than money. As he reached for his phone to begin what would be the most important battle of his life, One thought consumed him with crystalline clarity. He would rather lose everything he owned than lose the little girl who had taught him how to be human. But as the clock ticked toward 2 p.m., Alex couldn't shake the terrifying question that gnawed at him. Was he ready to discover just how much the system would fight to keep him away from the child who had already become the most important person in his world? At exactly 2 p.m., they came like vultures descending on fresh prey. Janet Morrison arrived with 2 uniformed officers and a social worker who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else in the world. Alex watched from his penthouse window as they approached the Sterling Grand, his heart hammering against his ribs like a caged bird, desperate for freedom. "Mr. Sterling," Janet Morrison's voice cut through the hotel lobby like a blade. "We're here for Sophie Williams." Alex had spent the morning on the phone with Michael Harrison, trying to build some legal foundation to stand on, but the harsh reality was inescapable. He had no legal rights to Sophie, none. He was just a stranger who had taken in a child without permission, and no amount of good intentions would change that fact in the eyes of the law. "She's upstairs," Alex said quietly, his voice barely recognizing itself. "But I want you to know that she's thriving here. She's gained weight, she's continuing her education, she's contributing to legitimate business operations." "Mr. Sterling," Janet interrupted, "I understand you believe you were helping, but proper child placement requires extensive background checks, home studies, psychological evaluations, and supervised transition periods. You bypassed every safeguard designed to protect vulnerable children." Sophie appeared in the lobby elevator, and Alex's heart shattered into a million pieces. She had packed her few belongings into the same worn backpack she'd arrived with. She carried herself with that same dignified posture, but Alex could see the fear she was trying so hard to hide. "Sophie," Janet Morrison approached with practiced gentleness. "I'm Janet from Child Services. We're going to find you a proper home with a family who's been approved to care for children like you." "Children like me." Sophie's voice was steady, but Alex caught the slight tremor underneath. "What exactly does that mean, Ms. Morrison?" The social worker fumbled for words, and Alex saw the moment Sophie's brilliant mind processed the uncomfortable truth that she was being categorized, labeled, reduced to a type of child, rather than being seen as the remarkable individual she was. "I'll come visit you," Alex promised desperately. "We'll figure this out, Sophie." "This isn't permanent." But Janet Morrison shook her head firmly. "Mr. Sterling, until our investigation is complete, you're not permitted any contact with Sophie. Any attempt to see her or communicate with her could result in criminal charges." As they led Sophie toward the door, she turned back one last time. "Thank you," she mouthed silently to Alex, "for showing me what kindness looks like." The lobby doors closed behind them, and Alexander Sterling, the man who had conquered boardrooms, crushed competitors, and built an empire through sheer force of will, collapsed into the nearest chair and felt truly powerless for the first time in his adult life. "Michael," he said into his phone, with a voice that sounded like it belonged to a ghost, "I don't care what it costs. I don't care how long it takes. I don't care if I have to tear down the entire system. Find a way to bring her home. Deal?" But as Alex stared at the empty lobby where Sophie had stood moments before, one terrifying thought consumed him. What if the system was designed specifically to keep people like him away from children like her? The foster home where they placed Sophie was a Victorian house in Queens that had been converted to accommodate 6 children under the supervision of Mrs. Patricia Henley, a 60-year-old woman who ran her facility with military precision and minimal warmth. Sophie's new room was a converted closet with bunk beds and a single window that looked out onto an alley where garbage trucks rumbled past at dawn. "You'll follow the house rules," Mrs. Henley explained during Sophie's first day, her voice carrying the exhaustion of someone who had processed too many broken children over too many years. Breakfast at 7, school pickup at 7:45, dinner at 6, lights out at 8:30. No exceptions, no special treatment. You're not unique here, Sophie Williams. But Sophie was unique, and it showed immediately. While the other children struggled with basic homework, Sophie completed advanced mathematics and read literature in multiple languages. While they watched television after dinner, Sophie asked permission to use the library books she'd managed to bring from Alex's hotel. Her very presence seemed to highlight the limitations of a system designed for the lowest common denominator rather than individual excellence. Meanwhile, Alex's investigation into Sophie's legal status had uncovered a bureaucratic nightmare that would have impressed Kafka himself. After her parents' death, Sophie had been shuffled through 3 different foster homes in 8 months. The first family had returned her after 2 weeks, claiming she was too smart for her own good, and made their biological children feel inadequate. The second family had kept her for 4 months, until their own financial crisis forced them to reduce their foster count. The third placement had lasted only 3 weeks. "The pattern is troubling," Michael Harrison reported during their daily briefing at Alex's office. Each family received glowing reports about Sophie's intelligence, manners, and behavior, but each placement failed for reasons that had nothing to do with her conduct and everything to do with adult inadequacy. "What about her parents' estate?" Alex asked, grasping for any legal thread that might help. Surely there were provisions for her care. Michael's expression darkened. "That's where things get complicated, Alex. The State Department handled the repatriation of their bodies and the settlement of their affairs, but there are discrepancies in the documentation, gaps, missing papers. And there's something else. Sophie's birth certificate has some irregularities that the system flagged but never investigated." "What kind of irregularities?" "The kind that suggests someone very powerful wanted to make sure Sophie Williams could disappear into the system without attracting too much attention." As Alex processed this information, his phone rang with a call that would change everything he thought he knew about Sophie's situation. "Mr. Sterling, this is Dr. Amanda Chen, Sophie's teacher at PS 234. I understand you're trying to help her." "Yes, though I'm not sure how much I can actually do." "Mr. Sterling," Dr. Chen interrupted urgently, "I need you to know that Sophie Williams is the most gifted child I've encountered in 20 years of teaching. Her IQ tests put her in the 99, 8th percentile. She reads at a college level, speaks 4 languages fluently, and yesterday she helped me solve a mathematical problem that I'd been struggling with for weeks." Alex's heart soared with pride, but Dr. Chen continued with increasing concern. "But here's what worries me, Mr. Sterling. Sophie told me about living with you, about the business meetings, about feeling safe and valued for the first time since her parents died. And now she's withdrawn again, barely speaking, going through the motions of classroom participation without any of the joy she showed when she talked about her time at your hotel." "What are you saying, Dr. Chen?" "I'm saying that child is dying inside, Mr. Sterling. Whatever legal battles you're fighting, you need to fight them faster. Sophie Williams doesn't just need a home. She needs to be with someone who recognizes her extraordinary potential and has the resources to nurture it." After hanging up, Alex stared out his office window at the Manhattan skyline that had once represented his conquest of the world. Now it looked cold and meaningless compared to the warmth he'd felt watching Sophie read Arabic poetry in his penthouse. "Michael," he said with renewed determination, "dig deeper into those missing documents. If someone wanted Sophie to disappear into the system, there's a reason, and I'm going to find out what it is." But as Alex prepared for what would become the fight of his life, he couldn't shake the feeling that Sophie's story was more complicated and more dangerous than anyone suspected. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Elizabeth Warren, not the politician, but a retired State Department archivist had been quietly researching the Williams family case for months as part of her personal project documenting American diplomatic casualties. She contacted Alex after reading about his legal battle in the New York Times Metro section. "Mr. Sterling," she said during their clandestine meeting in a coffee shop near Columbia University, "I worked with James and Sarah Williams in Washington before their Kuwait assignment. They were among the most brilliant diplomatic minds of their generation. But more importantly, they were terrified of something." Alex leaned forward, his entire body tense with attention. Terrified of what? "They came to me 6 months before the car accident, asking questions about how to create untraceable documentation for their daughter. They wanted to know about witness protection protocols, about how to help a child disappear if something happened to them." The implications hit Alex like lightning. They knew they were in danger. "More than that," Dr. Warren continued, sliding a manila folder across the table, "I've spent months investigating their deaths. The official report lists it as an accident during a sandstorm, but the forensic evidence doesn't match. The crash pattern, the timing, the fact that they were traveling to the airport at 3 a.m. for a flight that didn't exist, none of it makes sense." Alex opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were photographs, documents, and correspondence that painted a picture of 2 diplomats who had stumbled onto something they weren't supposed to know. Arms dealing, money laundering, corruption that reached into the highest levels of both American and Kuwaiti governments. James Williams was a cultural attaché, but his real job was tracking financial irregularities in diplomatic accounts. Sarah's linguistic work was actually code-breaking. She was intercepting and translating communications between suspected arms dealers. Dr. Warren's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "They found evidence of a weapons trafficking operation using diplomatic pouches to move illegal arms from American suppliers to Middle Eastern buyers. And they were killed for it," Alex said, the pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. "The evidence suggests it, yes, but here's what's really important for Sophie. Her parents managed to hide something before they died, something that certain powerful people have been looking for ever since." "What kind of something?" "Financial records, bank account numbers, evidence that could bring down people who have billions of dollars at stake." Dr. Warren leaned closer. "Mr. Sterling, Sophie Williams isn't just an orphaned child lost in the system. She's the daughter of 2 murdered whistleblowers, and there are people who believe she might know where her parents hid the evidence that could destroy them." Alex's blood turned cold as the full scope of the danger became clear. "That's why she ended up on the streets. Someone made sure she'd be vulnerable, easy to find. And why someone reported your arrangement to child services the moment Sophie started appearing in public with you. They want her isolated, controllable, afraid." Dr. Warren gathered her documents. "Mr. Sterling, you're not just fighting a custody battle. You're fighting to keep that child alive." As Alex walked back to his hotel, his mind reeled with the implications. Sophie's intelligence, her diplomatic background, her mysterious arrival at his hotel. None of it was coincidence. She had been guided there, possibly by someone who knew she'd be safe with him, or possibly by someone who wanted to flush out anyone who might try to help her. That evening, Alex made a decision that would either save Sophie's life or end his own. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he'd hoped never to use. "Agent Sarah Martinez, this is Alexander Sterling. I have information about the Williams diplomatic murders, and I need witness protection for a child. How quickly can we meet?" But as Alex waited for her response, one terrifying thought consumed him. How many other people were listening to this phone call, and how much time did he have before they came for both him and Sophie? Agent Sarah Martinez arrived at Alex's penthouse at midnight, accompanied by 2 federal marshals who swept the apartment for listening devices before allowing her to speak. Her news was worse than Alex's darkest fears. "Mr. Sterling, Sophie Williams is in immediate danger, and so are you." Agent Martinez spread classified documents across Alex's dining table, the same table where Sophie had done homework just weeks before. The arms trafficking ring her parents exposed reaches into the highest levels of government and international business. We're talking about senators, defense contractors, foreign ministers, people with the power to make problems disappear permanently. Alex studied the photographs and financial records, recognizing several names from his own business dealings. "How long have you been investigating this?" 3 years. James and Sarah Williams were our inside sources, feeding us intelligence from Kuwait while maintaining their diplomatic cover. But someone leaked their identities, and they were eliminated before they could deliver the final evidence we needed to make arrests. The evidence that's still missing. Exactly. And here's what makes this critical. We've been monitoring communications between the trafficking network since Sophie started living with you. They believe she knows where her parents hid the final pieces of evidence. Alex felt the floor shifting beneath him. Does she? We don't know, but they're planning to find out. Agent Martinez pulled out a surveillance photograph that made Alex's heart stop. It showed Janet Morrison from Child Services meeting with a man in an expensive suit outside an upscale restaurant. The social worker who removed Sophie from your care? She's been compromised. The foster home where Sophie is staying? It's a front. The revelation hit Alex like a physical blow. They have her. Not yet, but they're moving tonight. Mrs. Henley received orders to transfer Sophie to a specialized facility for psychological evaluation. Once they have her isolated, they'll interrogate her using methods that... Agent Martinez didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Alex was already reaching for his coat. Where is she? Mr. Sterling, this isn't a rescue mission you can handle alone. We need... Where is she? Alex's voice carried a dangerous edge that made both federal marshals step forward. Agent Martinez made a decision that would either save Sophie's life or end all of their careers. The transfer is happening at 2 a.m. from the Queen's facility. 3 black SUVs headed to a private psychiatric facility in upstate New York that doesn't legally exist. I'm going after her. If you interfere with the federal operation, I can't protect you. Alex looked directly into Agent Martinez's eyes. Agent Martinez, that little girl taught me what it means to be human. She showed me that there are things in this world worth fighting for, worth dying for. I don't care about federal operations or legal protection. I care about getting her back. As Alex prepared to walk into what might be his final battle, Agent Martinez handed him a secure phone and a bulletproof vest. Mr. Sterling, there's something else you need to know about Sophie Williams. Something that changes everything. What? Her parents didn't just hide financial evidence before they died. They hid a confession, a detailed account of everything they'd discovered, everyone involved, all the evidence needed to bring down the entire network. Agent Martinez paused, her expression grave, and they taught Sophie how to access it. Alex stared at the agent as the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. She's not just a witness. She's the key to everything. Which is why they'll kill anyone who tries to protect her, including you. As Alex headed toward the door, bulletproof vest under his coat and determination burning in his chest, one thought consumed him with crystalline clarity. Sophie Williams had saved his soul. Now it was time for him to save her life. But as he stepped into the elevator that would take him to the most dangerous night of his life, Alex couldn't shake the terrifying certainty that before morning came, one of them wouldn't be coming home. The Queen's foster home sat in darkness at 1:47 a.m., but Alex could see the subtle signs of activity, shadows moving behind curtains, the soft glow of cell phone screens, the tension of people waiting for something to happen. He crouched behind a parked car across the street, his heart hammering with a mixture of terror and determination that made his hands shake. Agent Martinez's voice crackled through his earpiece. 3 minutes until the transfer vehicles arrive. Sterling, you're not trained for this. Wait for backup. But Alex had spent the last 2 hours thinking about Sophie's face when they'd taken her away, remembering how she'd mouthed, "Thank you," as they led her to a life of danger she didn't even know she was walking into. Every second he waited was a second closer to losing her forever. "I'm not waiting," he whispered into the comm device. "That little girl is in there, probably terrified, definitely alone, and I'm the only person in the world who promised her she'd never have to be afraid again." Through the foster home's front window, Alex caught a glimpse of movement, Mrs. Henley leading a small figure down the stairs. Even in silhouette, he recognized Sophie's posture, the dignified way she carried herself even when walking toward unknown danger. The first black SUV rounded the corner at exactly 2 a.m., followed by 2 others, professional, coordinated, lethal. These weren't social workers coming to help a child, these were operators who eliminated problems. "Sophie's coming out now," Alex reported, watching as Mrs. Henley opened the front door. "They're moving her toward the first vehicle." That's when he saw Sophie do something that confirmed everything Agent Martinez had told him about her intelligence and her parents' preparation. As they walked her toward the SUV, Sophie stumbled slightly and dropped something small near the front steps, something that glinted in the streetlight for just a moment before disappearing into the shadows. "She's leaving a trail," Alex breathed. "She knows she's in danger." Agent Martinez's voice carried new urgency. "Sterling, our backup team is still 8 minutes out. If you're going to move, it has to be now." Alex watched as they helped Sophie into the middle SUV, his mind racing through possibilities. He was one man with no combat training going up against professional killers. The rational choice was to wait for federal backup and hope they could track the vehicles. But rationality had nothing to do with the way he felt about Sophie Williams. "Agent Martinez," Alex said, starting his Bentley's engine. "I'm not a federal agent. I'm not a trained operative. But I am a man who made a promise to a little girl, and I've broken too many promises in my life to break this one." "Sterling, don't—" "Tell me something," Alex interrupted, pulling out to follow the convoy at a distance. "When you were 8 years old, was there anyone in your life who would have driven into hell to keep you safe?" The pause on the other end of the line told him everything he needed to know. "Sophie Williams saved my life by showing me what it means to care about someone else more than yourself," Alex continued, staying 3 cars behind the SUV convoy. "Now I'm going to return the favor." As the vehicles headed toward the highway that would take them upstate to God knew what kind of facility, Alex's phone rang with an unknown number. Against all protocols, he answered. "Mr. Sterling." The voice was Sophie's, but she was speaking in Arabic, her tone carefully controlled. "Ana fi khatar. هم يعرفون أن والداي أخفوا شيئا مهما يريدون مني أن أخبرهم مكانه." Alex's blood froze as he translated her words. "I'm in danger. They know my parents hid something important. They want me to tell them where it is." "Sophie, where are you going?" "Makan fi ash-shamal, markaz tibi khas. Wakin laysa markazun tibyun hakikiyun." A medical facility up north. But it's not a real medical facility. The line went dead, but Sophie had told him everything he needed to know. She was being taken to a place where no one would hear her scream, where professionals would extract information using methods that would destroy her mind, even if they let her live. "Agent Martinez," Alex said into his comm device as he pressed his foot to the accelerator, "I need you to understand something. I'm going to get that little girl back, and I'm going to make sure the people who hurt her never hurt anyone else again. Sterling, you're driving into a trap. They'll kill you both." Then they'll have to catch us first. And as Alex's Bentley roared up the highway in pursuit of the convoy, carrying the most important person in his world, one thought burned in his mind with the intensity of a star going supernova. Sophie Williams had taught him the difference between existing and living. Tonight, he was going to show her the difference between being saved and being truly free. But as the lights of New York City disappeared behind him and the road ahead led into darkness, Alex couldn't escape one final terrifying question. Even if he could save Sophie, would either of them survive long enough to see tomorrow? The medical facility was a nightmare disguised as healing. Alex found it at 3:17 a.m., a converted warehouse surrounded by forest, no signage, no indication of its true purpose. Through wire-reinforced windows, he saw sterile rooms that looked like interrogation chambers. "Agent Martinez," he whispered into his comm device, "I'm going in." "Sterling, backup is 2 minutes away." Sophie doesn't have 2 minutes. Alex had never been a physical man. His battles were fought in boardrooms. But approaching that building where Sophie was held, he felt something primal awakening. The fierce protective instinct that transforms ordinary people into heroes. He found an unlocked service entrance and slipped inside, following voices down a sterile hallway. Through a partially open door, he saw Sophie sitting in a metal chair, 3 men in expensive suits surrounding her. "Sophie," the lead interrogator was saying, "your parents hid something very important. We know they taught you how to find it. Tell us where to look." "I don't know what you're talking about," Sophie replied with heartbreaking dignity. "Child, we can make this easy or difficult, but you're not leaving until we have what we need." Sophie looked directly at the interrogator and said in perfect Arabic, "Ana arif man antum, walidaya akhbarani ankum, wa ana arif kaifa uhatimukum." Alex's breath caught. She'd just said, "I know who you are. My parents told me about you, and I know how to destroy you." "What did she say?" the man demanded. Before fear could stop him, Alex kicked open the door. "She said, you're about to meet someone who cares more about her life than his own," Alex announced, his voice carrying newfound authority. "Mr. Sterling?" The lead interrogator smiled coldly. "How convenient. Now we can eliminate both problems at once." "Sophie," Alex said without taking his eyes off the men, "remember what you taught me about Arabic culture, about protecting family." Sophie's eyes lit up with understanding. "Na'am, ya abi," she said clearly. "Yes, father." In that moment, with that single word, abi, Sophie Williams claimed Alex as family in a way that transcended blood or law. "The evidence you want," Sophie continued, standing with newfound strength, "isn't hidden in some vault. My parents were smarter than that." She walked to Alex's side, her small hand slipping into his with absolute trust. "They hid it in the one place no one would think to look," Sophie said, her 8-year-old voice carrying inherited courage. "They hid it in me." Sophie closed her eyes and began reciting what sounded like a children's nursery rhyme in Arabic. But as the words continued, Alex realized this wasn't a song. It was an encrypted sequence containing bank account numbers, transaction records, names, dates, and locations. Her parents had encoded the entire arms trafficking network into a memorized poem. "Every number, every name, every piece of evidence you've been killing for," Sophie said, opening her eyes to stare at her captors. "I have it all right here." She tapped her temple. "And Agent Martinez has recorded every word." Oh, the interrogators spun around to see federal agents flooding through every entrance, weapons drawn, the full weight of the government descending on the room where a little girl and a reformed billionaire had just brought down an international conspiracy. As arrests began, as handcuffs clicked and rights were read, Alex held Sophie close, both shaking with relief and something deeper, the recognition that they had saved each other. "Sophie," Alex whispered, "are you okay?" She looked up with eyes sparkling with mischief for the first time since he'd known her. Mr. Sterling, I was never in real danger. What do you mean? My parents taught me that poem when I was 6. They said if anything happened to them, I should find someone strong and kind, someone who would fight for me, then recite the poem when bad people came. She smiled. They told me the poem would bring help, but the person who fought for me, that person, would become my real family. Alex felt tears streaming as the full scope of James and Sarah Williams's final gift became clear. They hadn't just hidden evidence in Sophie's memory. They had created a test to find the one person worthy of becoming her father. "Sophie Williams," Alex said, voice thick with emotion, "would you like to come home?" "Alexander Sterling," she replied with that dignified smile that had captured his heart. "I thought you'd never ask." 6 months later, signing the final adoption papers, Alex reflected on their transformation. He had learned that real wealth was measured not in dollars, but in love worth protecting. Sophie had learned that family isn't blood, but people who choose to fight for you. "Ready to go home, Dad?" Sophie asked, using the word that still made his heart sore. "Ready, sweetheart," Alex replied, taking her hand. Sometimes the best families are chosen, and sometimes the greatest treasure isn't gold. It's the chance to love unconditionally and be loved in return.